looking at writing of user stories, right, in requirements. Let me just share my screen. Come in. Let me share my entire screen in this instance then. So let me know when you can see my screen. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So last week we looked at use case specification, which is another technique we use in specifying functional requirements. Today we're looking at epics and user stories. And I know I've made mention of epics and user stories just briefly when we looked at when we considered documentation formats, right? And I said I'll dedicate a full class where we discuss epics and user stories. So today we're going to look at epics, user stories, and acceptance criteria. What do they mean, and how do we write an epic? How do we write a user story? How do we write an acceptance criteria? And then at the end of the day, we'll do some practice in class. So I'm going to write user stories for you guys, and thereafter, um, also we'll do a walkthrough on non-functional requirements. So starting with epics. Epics basically are considered to be a large piece or large body of work that needs to be implemented. But the fact is that sometimes you may not be able to complete an epic in a sprint. And because of that, we kind of break it down into smaller pieces called user stories. So an epic is considered to be a large piece of work that we need to implement by first breaking it down into user stories. Let me give another example. So you buy a bottle of granules, right? A bottle of granules, or but let's say you bought a goat you want to kill and use to prepare meal, right? You agree with me that for your own personal consumption, it will not be possible for you to kill a full goat and use all of the meats at once to prepare rice, or use all of the meat at once to prepare soup. It's going to be an overkill for you, right? What you're going to do is you might choose to say, okay, let me, for this goat, I want to use the leg of the goat to prepare meal this weekend. So I'm going to cook soup and I'm going to cook stew with goat meat, and I use full goat. So for the head of the goat, maybe I'll distribute the head into further units that will be smaller for me to chew piece by piece when I'm having my meal. So you can consider the head of the goat to be an epic, which we need to break further into different pieces that we can eat in a single meal, right? For a particular period of time, let's say for 2 weeks or a week. And then next week, we decide to eat the leg, one of the legs, in a week for another 2 weeks. Then another 2 weeks, we eat another leg. Another 2 weeks, we eat another leg. And little by little, we consume all the parts of the goat. That is how epics stands for, right? We want to build a solution. We are able to identify what are the different epics, right, of that particular epic. And for every sprint or in every 2 sprints, we're able to complete those epics by delivering the user stories that make up the epics. So epics may not be achieved in one iteration. Sometimes might need to achieve them in 2 or 3 iterations. Epics have a template of its own, that's whereby an epic has a title, which is called an epic title. Then it has a description, the epic description, which describes what the epic is about. An example of an epic title here is onboarding, right? It's onboarding, and the epic description could be customers should be able to onboard on the solution by completing the sign up, registration, and verification steps successfully. So, excuse me. So we should be able to understand what the epic is and what are the components of that epic, because it's from that component that we'll be able to break out the user stories. And the user stories are like the smaller, abridged version. So going into user stories, they are like the smaller piecemeal that we need to deliver in a sprint or in an iteration to ensure that we are delivering value to the customer. A user story is basically used in Agile. That is one prominent place where we use user stories. And we need to capture the description of the features of that software from the user's perspective. It's like you telling a story from a user. So you are the business analyst, you are the product owner, or you are the product manager, and you want to express how you want your users or your customers to use a particular feature. Assume you want to build a dark feature, a feature that will allow customers to toggle between dark or bright feature for the app. Or assuming you are trying to build a feature that will allow customers to enable or disable push notifications on the app, right? For such features, when you are writing a user story for that features, you are basically telling a story, a functional requirement from a story point of that particular user, how that user would love to use that particular feature. User story describes what the type of user is, what they want to achieve, and why they want to achieve it, or what they want to do and why they want to do it. So a user story is basically evaluated using the inverse characteristics, as we discussed in, I think, a couple of classes back, where we looked at attributes of a requirement. And inverse stands for independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, and testable. The user story being independent means that we can't break it or disintegrate it further. So when we've been able to realize that we can't disintegrate a user story into other user stories, we can boldly say that we've been able to write a good user story. The user story should also be negotiable, in the sense that you should create more room for analysis. You should allow stakeholders, the engineering team, and whoever will be part of the refinement section to, provide analysis, to ask questions, to brainstorm around that user story in terms of trying to devise ways to solve the problem. User story should be valuable as well, in the sense that it should give some sort of benefits, right? It should be able to communicate some sort of benefits to the person, to the role, or to the user that should be performing that activity. It could be a business benefit, it could be a customer benefit in the sense of user experience, it could be also whatever benefits, rather. So it's all about communicating value, benefits to that particular user that will be making use of that particular feature. Then it should be estimable. The guys, the engineering guys, the team should be able to give an estimate on the amount of effort that will be required to implement that user story, that will be required to develop that particular feature, right? The amount of effort and possibly time considerations in building out that particular user story. The user story as well should be small. It shouldn't be large. You shouldn't have a user story that's there's a lot of and. Some people write a user story and say, as a user, I want to be able to do this and 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 do this so that I can achieve this and this and this and this. So it should be small in the sense that it should not be large. It should not communicate a vague and unrealistic goal. And the user story should be testable as well. We should be able to have some sort of criteria that we can use to validate or test the implementation of that particular user story. The user story is also lightweight. That means it is not heavy, as I said. So it should be small. It's implemented in an iteration. The user story is what we hope to achieve in a sprint or in an iteration, and it is not required to be broken down. If there's possibility that we'll find out that the user story is large, then we can basically break it down into smaller versions. The user story has a structure, and the structure of a user story is this. As a role, I want to perform a task so that I can get a result. You don't need to cram this. All you have to do is to know this. Why it's important to know this is because when you know the structure of a user story, it will be easier for you to implement, to write as much user stories as possible you want to write. So if I want to write a user story for an educational platform, right? The role will be either a student or a candidate. So I'll say as a student, or I'll say as a candidate, depending on whichever terminology I want to use. So the structure of a user story is, as a role, I want to perform a task so that I can achieve a certain set or a particular result. That is the structure of a user story. Let's take an example of a user story here. So you're looking at a user story on title. For customer registration. That is user story for registering a customer on a Monzo app. So Monzo is a fintech or a new bank application that basically provides financial solutions to people in the UK, I think in the EU as well. So as a customer, remember, as a role, the role here is a customer, or as a user, the user here is a customer. As a customer, I want to be able to perform a task. The task they want to perform is to provide personal information such as first name, last name, residential address, date of birth, and reason for using Monzo, so that I can achieve a result. What is the result? Or so that I can get a value, or so that I can get a benefit. What is the result of value or benefit? Register on the Monzo app. So they want to perform the task of providing their personal information so that they can register on Monzo. So that basically is what a user story is all about. The structure as a role or as a user, I want to perform a task, right? So that I can achieve a result or get a value or get a benefit or for a reason. That is what user story is all about. I don't know if you have any question regarding user stories and acceptance criteria. Sorry, and epics.
It's very clear. I have no question.
Okay. How about you, Michelle?
No question. So, but sorry, does it mean basically user story is smaller pieces of an epic? Is that what it means?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm good.
That's what it means. All right, thanks. So let's take a look at acceptance criteria. As the name goes, acceptance criteria, the list of criteria that needs to be met before we can accept that particular feature, right? That is what acceptance criteria speaks to. So what are the criteria that we need to satisfy in order to say, oh, this feature we are building is acceptable, right? So acceptance criteria refers to a set of predefined requirements that must be met to mark a user story complete. So it's like, these are the list of requirements we need to meet so that we can tick this user story as what? Being complete. Acceptance criteria should be testable. Should be able to test the acceptance criteria. The QA should be to test the acceptance criteria. Even the engineer should to perform some sort of unit testing on the acceptance criteria. It should be clear. It should not be ambiguous. It should not be complicated. It should be concise. It should be understandable. Everyone should be able to understand what you are communicating in your acceptance criteria. If they don't, feel free to go ahead to review what you've written and ensure that it is clear and understandable. To cater for the perspective of the user as well. When you're writing the acceptance criteria, especially when you're writing a user story, try as much as possible not to focus the acceptance criteria on the system. Rather, let the acceptance criteria be focused on the user that you are writing it about. There are two different types of acceptance criteria. But one is the rule-based acceptance criteria, where you kind of specify or list out the rules or criteria or conditions that need to be satisfied for you to validate the implementation of that particular feature or the implementation of that user story. And then we have the criteria-based, or popularly called the Gherkin syntax type of acceptance criteria, which goes with the given that it has a given, when, and then structure. What I mean by given, when, and then structure is that the given helps to set a premise, a condition, right? When talks about the action that will be performed, and then talks about the outcome. So giving a condition or giving some set of conditions are met, when an action is performed by the user, then this outcome should result. So given that a customer is on the registration page, so given that they've met the condition of being on the registration page, when they perform an action, that is when the customer has entered all required fields in the acceptable format, then an outcome, then the customer should be able to continue to verification. So given that a condition has been met, or given a scenario is set, when an action has been performed by a user, then an outcome should result, or an outcome should happen. That basically is what acceptance criteria all talks about. I don't know if you have any question before we just look at non-functional requirement, then we head straight to practice.
Yes, I do have a question. Could you
Yeah,
please
go ahead.
expatiate more about the rule-based acceptance criteria?
Okay,
So,
for rule, okay, go ahead. I think you.
So I perfectly understand the criteria based, but for the rule based, it's a bit sketchy.
Okay, so for the rule base, what we're basically talking about is that you are stating the rules, you're stating the conditions. You're basically talking about, let's say, for instance, we write a user story, and a rule base can have, there should be the login button should be functional when the customer clicks on it. You're like stating that rule. So you're making statement of rules. But if you are to state this particular acceptance criteria using using a Gherkin syntax, that's the criteria base, you say, given that the customer is on the login page, when the customer clicks on the login button, then the system should be able to load the next page, provided all conditions have been satisfied. That is the Gherkin syntax. But in the rule, it's clearly stated that the login button should be functional so that when the customer clicks on it, the next page will load.
So can I conclude that the rule base tends towards technical perspective, while the criteria is from the user's perspective?
So you won't say technical perspective per se. It depends on how you want to communicate it. The truth about it is that the criteria base, that's the Gherkin syntax, is more technical than the rule base, right?
Okay.
In terms of, it requires you to have a very strong technique in writing it. If you don't have a great technique in writing it, you might mess it up.
Okay.
Because you need to understand what should be the condition, what should be the action, and what should be the outcome in each of those acceptance criteria you're going to be writing. But for the rule base, you can go ahead stating your conditions and stating your criteria as much as you have. Some people use must test. Like one of my colleagues in the office, if he's writing acceptance criteria, you say must test that customer can only continue, or must test that customer can do this. Sometimes also writing, I use must ensure. So you're basically stating the rules of You're not following a structure that says giving that when this, then this.
So in a nutshell, rules-based is a bit easier and simpler than Gherkin syntax.
Yes, it's a lot more easier and simpler. But developers would even prefer you to write a Gherkin syntax. because getting syntax helps them to understand the premise.
Okay, I understand. Okay, thank you.
Not judgment. Thanks so much, Ahmad. Any question, Mitchell? Is Mitchell still on call?
No, I'm here.
Did you have any question?
No question.
Okay. So we go ahead to non-functional requirement, and then I'll come on to Jira to do some practice user story and acceptance criteria. So non-functional requirement, as the name goes, quality of service, non-functional. We're not bothered about functionality here. Talking about the quality of the solution, ensuring that the service the solution is providing, or the service the products or software is providing is quality or gives the best experience to our customers and gives a better brand image to us. So non-functional requirement describes how a solution must behave and establish constraints for its functionality. This type of requirement is also known as systems quality attributes. There are different types of non-functional requirements, and number one on the list is the usability requirement. The usability requirement basically helps us to understand or to write requirements that talks about how usable or how the ease of use the solution should be. Before now, people just write requirements, but they don't try to understand that people using the solution are actually humans and not robots. And we need to cater for how easy it is for people or for users to be able to use a particular solution. And that is why we have usability requirements. You can agree with me that there have been some websites or applications that you have downloaded and it is complex and it's difficult for you to use them. A good example is this. You can download Binance. There's an app called Binance, which is for trading cryptocurrency. Now, when you download Binance and you turn on the professional or the pro version of Binance from your app, you realize that if you are new to Binance, it will be so complicated for you. You will not understand it. For you to understand it, you can toggle on or switch on to basic or classic feature. With that basic or classic feature, you realize that you can easily have a grasp of what the Binance app is talking about. So sometimes usability requirements cater for users being able to use the application easily without too much or so much support or assistance from any external source. Another type of non-functional requirement is reliability. Reliability basically speaks to the capability or the possibility of the system or solution or product being able to provide reliable information, reliable data. Let me give you an instance. So if I sent you 10,000 naira, right, for you to just use to buy something for the weekend, maybe you want to go have fun for the weekend, I send you 10,000 naira. If I send you that 10,000 naira from my Access Bank account to your Zenith Bank account, if by the time the money gets to your bank account and you see 1,000 naira, and then you tell me, Genesis, you said it, you told me that you sent 10,000 naira, but I'm only seeing 1,000 naira. Then I pull up my transaction receipt and send you the transaction receipt to confirm to you that I actually sent 10,000 naira to you. You realize that there's some sort of, lack of trust, right, on either your own bank, Zenith Bank, or my own bank, Access Bank, begins to come in place because we feel like the data, the information we're getting from the system is not reliable. I've sent 10,000 and you are receiving 1,000. Is it that something happened? Is it that there's some sort of hidden charges somewhere, right? That is one. Another one is also in terms of data. Assuming the information you filled in when creating your account is Ahmad Sani, right? But whenever you try to make a transaction, you are seeing Ahmed Sami, right? You realize that the data you are seeing from the system is not reliable. So reliability is a non-functional requirement that speaks to the quality of that particular system. The system needs to be reliable in the sense that whatever data we are getting, or maybe we try to download a report, assuming in your mobile app, in your bank mobile app, you want to download your statements for the month of May, and you know fully well that you only performed 10 transactions in the month of May. And by the time you export your monthly statement, that is month of May, from your maybe Access Bank or Zenith or GT accounts, when you from the mobile app, when you download it and then you open the PDF to look at your statement, you realize that you performed over 30 transactions. Whereas you know that you did not perform even more than 10 transactions in that month. You begin to doubt the authenticity, right, or the reliability of the data you are getting from that particular service. So reliability is a requirement that we write to ensure that the system is reliable. There's data retention, there's data reliability, there's accuracy of data as well. Another type of non-functional requirement is performance. Performance speaks to optimization, how well the system is going, right? You realize that some people, they'll tell you that we're experiencing system downtime. A performance requirement basically means that the requirement to have at least a 99.5% uptime. So there is no sort of downtime at any point in time. You realize that sometimes you try to make a transfer, right? You try to send money, and the transfer does not go. Is either it is declined, and this happens most times in what they call it now, in POS transactions. Maybe you go to the mall, or you go to supermarket, or you go to buy fuel with your card, and then you put in your debit card in the POS for it to process the transaction. And you realize that you get a debit alert, but the POS shows transaction decline. So, excuse me. You realize that transaction decline means that there's a performance issue, there's a problem that has occurred. Maybe the system is not as efficient as it ought to be. So performance requirements are requirements that we write, or not functional requirements to write, to ensure that the system is as efficient as possible. Another one is security. Security requirements are basically written to ensure that there is safety of customer information, safety of system data as well. So security requirements cater to pointing out those security measures that need to put in place when we are actually building or developing the solution. Another one is accessibility. And accessibility requirements are basically started gaining prominence in the last 5 to 10 years. What it means, what accessibility requirement means is catering for features of the solution or the product that will enable people that are termed disabled to be able to use the product. Things like text to speech, right? Things like speech to text. Things like dark mode for those that have visual impairments, right? Those things like warm color mode, warm screen color mode for those that have visual impairments, right? So these are like accessibility features, things like vibration mode, so many features, right? These are non-functional requirements. So any requirement that speaks to accessibility are considered to be non-functional requirements because they look at the quality of service you'll be providing to your customer. Then we have the scalability requirements. Scalability requirements speaks to how the system will be able to accommodate additional requests, right? Bombardments from external sources. I think I've given an example of scalability in class before where I said, you remember back then when we used to write JAMB and WAEC, and when you are applying or you are registering for JAMB or registering for WAEC, if you find yourself registering late, you realize that even the website or the portal for JAMB will not be opening. It will be telling you 404 error, or it will be giving some sort of error message. That's because a lot of people are making requests. A lot of people are bombarding that portal at the go. and the system does not have what it takes to cater for that multiple requests or that amount of requests at that particular point in time. And what the system basically do will be to kind of break or break down and begins to send error messages out to users. To cater for that, we write what we call scalability requirements to ensure that when the system have multiple requests or more than enough requests as it ought to handle or as it's supposed to handle, the system is able to expand or accommodate additional requests to a certain degree. So when the system scales, right, it scales up its server to accommodate those requests. And when the system have very few requests, the system can scale down to ensure that we are utilizing resources on the server end. That is it about non-functional requirement. I don't know if you have any question before we go into the practice for today.
No question from my hand.
Okay. How about you, Michelle?
No, none.
Is it clear? Do we now know what non-functional requirement is, what the user story is, what an acceptance criteria, and what an epic is?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen for that. Okay, I'm sharing the entire screen, right? Okay, good. So let me open the requirement that we are using to practice in class for this IIBA e-voting solution, right? So we have, I believe you all know the requirements from what Michelle read last week. So I want to write a user story for how to log in, right? How eligible voters should be able to log in. You can see here it says eligible voters should be able to log in with their membership ID and password. Also, if they are logging in for the first time, they should be required to change their password. So I'm going to write a user story and an acceptance criteria for eligible voter login. So this is Jira. This is the Jira software, which are going to be using to write your own user stories in the project as well. And I'll share with you guys a link to a video on how to use Jira. I'll also share with you guys a link to a video on how to use Azure DevOps. These are like the two most popular platforms we use in writing user stories. So it's either your company is using Jira or there is an Azure DevOps. So it all depends. So, but the truth about it is whether it is Jira or it's Azure DevOps, as long as you know the structure of user stories, it is written the same way in Jira, it is written the same way in Azure DevOps, it's also written the same way whether you're using Microsoft Word or PowerPoint slide or Excel to write it. The structure remains the same. So to create a user story, Jira considers user stories or epics or tasks to be an issue. So you create a new issue, click on create, and then you select the type of issue. If it is a story, if it's a user story, you select story. If it is a tax, you select tax. If it is a bug is like an error that is encountered in the system. You select bug. If it's an epic, you select epic. So we are going to write a story. That's a user story. So I'll select story. You enter the title of the user story. So I can say eligible voter login, or let me say signing. Eligible voter signing. Now, this is where we enter the description of the user story. But I'm going to pass now. I'll enter it much later. And then you can assign this user story to anyone. If you want someone to work on it, you can assign it to that person. Then you can also set the priority of this user story. So we have the lowest, low, medium, high, and highest. You can set either of those, any of those priority. Then we have the epic. Remember, user story belongs to an epic. So you can select an epic that this user story belongs to. It could be that it belongs to the onboarding, since signing is part of the onboarding, or it could be that it belongs to account access. So you select account access. So We click on create, and the user story will be created with a unique ID. So this is a unique ID of the user story. PB5 is a unique ID of the user story. Now, we click on view issue so that we can view the user story. And here it is. This is the user story. Eligible voter signing. The ID is PB5. The epic is EVS 11. That is the epic for the user story. So and all of this place, you can see that the epic link is here. I can go to the epic to see other user stories in this epic. The priority, I can change the priority to maybe highest so that the engineering team know that this is a high priority requirement and they need to fix it. They need to work on it ASAP, right? Now, this is the comment section where you can mention your team members and all of that. Everything I've captured it in that Jira video I'm going to share with you guys. So to write a user story, what I normally do is I have job story. Then I use this code snippet to write my user story, just to make it a lot more presentable. Remember that the structure of it, who can remind me the structure of a user story? Anyone? Ahmad or Michelle? What is the structure of a user story? Can you guys hear me?
Sorry, I was mute. So sorry. So the structure of a user story is, as a role, I want a function so that I can get a benefit.
Okay. Well, how about you, Michelle? What do you think? The structure of a user story.
I'm not sure.
But I just mentioned it some minutes ago.
So also we can say, as a who, I want what so that why.
Yeah. So as a role, I want to perform a function or a task. Perform a function or a task so that I can get a benefit or achieve a result.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, are you following us?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Okay, because this was just the structure I just read through like some minutes ago from the slide. You remember? So what I said here. Yeah, as a role, I want to perform a task so that I can get a result. Okay. So with this structure, I can easily do what we call plug and play. So for you that are writing a user story for the first time or you're new to this, I'll say start with the structure first, and then you before you start getting very used to it. So as a role, the role here is who? Who is the role? Michelle. Hello, Michelle, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm trying to. Okay, you said who is the role?
Yeah.
I'm not too sure.
But you can see it here. We're talking about eligible voter. So the role is eligible voter.
Okay.
EV.
Eligible voter. What is the task they want to perform? Michelle.
Signing.
Okay.
Yeah.
To sign in.
Okay. I want to sign in with my membership ID and password.
Password. Yeah.
So that what is the result? So what is the achievement or what is the benefits they want to get? Michelle.
The benefit to vote.
What
To be able
benefit
to vote.
usually is? Okay, we can look at it as being able to vote. Fine. What if they sign in and they don't choose to vote? They just want to read the profile of the candidates. So when you sign into a platform, what benefit do you want to have? Just give it a try. Anyone?
To make use of the system, or to make use
Make
of
what?
the,
Yes, to make use of the
make use
system,
of
isn't it?
Yes, to have access to the platform.
Good. So that I can have access to the
E-voting system. Yeah.
e-voting.
Voting system.
I can have access to my IIBA e-voting accounts.
Yeah.
Do you understand how? Did you see how easy it is for us? How easy it was for us to write this user story, because we're able to follow the structure as this. So I can say achieve a result. I just want to make it more clear to you. Please remember, Michelle, are you there with me?
Yes, I'm here.
If you remember, this is the structure of the user story. As a role, the role is eligible voter. I want to perform a task. The task is to sign in with my membership ID and password, right? So that I can achieve a result. The result is have access to my IIBA e-voting account, or have access to the IIBA e-voting portal or e-voting platform, however you want to state it. So that is how user stories are written. You don't need to cram anything. Just understand what the structure is, and with the structure, you can now go ahead to write your user story. Okay? That is it. The right acceptance criteria for this user story.
You haven't edited the line 2. I want to. I think you should remove perform a task. Yeah.
Sorry. Thanks.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. So acceptance criteria. Write the acceptance criteria. Remember, I will use the rule-based method, right?
Okay.
Because the getting syntax is going to be a chore and it will require a lot of, it will take a lot of time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to approach this from what I call happy path and unhappy. Now, by happy path, what I mean is the expected behavior. Sorry, the expected positive behavior of the system. Do you understand? The expected positive behavior. Or no, let me not say expected positive. The expected reaction when the user carries out the right or the correct, performs the correct task. the expected response or behavior when the user performs the correct task, or what should be the correct task the user perform. So what are the acceptance criteria for that? Why the unhappy part is also the expected behavior when the user or when an error occurs on the system. That is the unhappy part. Ahmad, your mic is on mute, so we're hearing noise from your background. Can you help us to mute? All right, thank you. So that is what happy and unhappy parts basically speaks to in a nutshell. So let's take a look at the happy parts. First, we'll look at it from the point of, first one will be, we must ensure that when an eligible voter is, sorry, must ensure that the eligible voter can see the various inputs on the login page. Now, you can also write it for membership. So let's say, let's look at membership ID. The following criteria should be satisfied for the membership ID inputs field. Also say the same thing. Let me copy and paste to save time. Password input field. Let me copy to save time for the login button. Now, let's further portrait on this. The membership ID should have 6 characters that consists of 3 uppercase alphabet or letters and 3 numbers. You understand? I can also say the membership ID inputs field should not accept special characters such as this, this, this and this and this. You should not accept special characters such as this. I can go on and on to talk more about this on the membership ID. But let's take a look as well on the password criteria. The password must be 8 characters. The password should contain at least 1 uppercase letter, 1 lowercase letter, 1 number, and 1 special character, such as, let's go again. one special character, right? The password input field should not accept more than 8 characters. That is for password. Let's look at the login button. The login button should should be functional, so that when should be functional and clickable. If the eligible voter has entered valid login credentials, when the login button is clicked, the home page of the e-voting solution should load. If the eligible voter is logging in for the first time, when the eligible voter clicks on the login button, the system should request the eligible voter to change their password. Change the password. Are you following with what I'm writing, Michelle? I'd like to know.
Yes. Yes, I'm following.
Do you understand what I'm trying to do? Or what I'm writing rather?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Okay. So I'm basically writing the happy part, like when things go well, right? When things go well and there's no issue, what should happen in each of those scenario or cases? That is what I'm writing. Okay. Now let me write for the unhappy path. So when things doesn't go well. For instance, an example of unhappy path is when the eligible voter did not enter a membership ID and they only entered a password and clicked on login. That means they should not be able to log in. An error should be displayed, right? So let's start with that. If the eligible voter omits any of the input fields and clicks on the login button, the login button should be disabled. And an error message should be displayed saying, kindly complete all fields before proceeding. So you can choose to give it a special font character so that It is distinct message, right?
Can I ask? Can I ask something?
Yeah, go ahead.
This looks like when we were doing the business rules under the Evoting solution the last
Yes,
time.
exactly.
So I'm
Remember, I
trying
told
to,
okay.
yeah, I'm trying to understand how this is there a difference between them? How does this relate to the business rules, or is it like a more detailed part of the business rules? Because it sounds like they are both doing the same job.
Awesome. That's a brilliant question. Remember that when we are looking at that business rules, we are looking at use case specifications, right? And use
Yes.
case specifications cater for waterfall development. Do you understand?
Okay.
But in agile development, we use user stories and acceptance criteria. Also, when I was talking about acceptance criteria, I said there are two types of acceptance criteria. There's rule-based, which is what we are writing now, which is also what we write when we are writing business rules. And there's criteria-based, which is the Gherkin syntax.
Yeah.
Do you remember? I mentioned this some minutes ago.
Yes.
Yes.
When I was teaching the acceptance criteria. So I'm writing the rule-based type of acceptance criteria.
Acceptance.
Business rule
Exactly.
is also an example of an acceptance criteria, but it's a rule-based acceptance criteria.
Okay.
Do you get it now?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I would like you both to give me examples of unhappy parts acceptance criteria. So one from Mitchell and one from Ahmad. So Mitchell, let me give you a hint. What should happen when when an eligible voter enters an incorrect membership ID and tries to log in? What should happen?
The system will bring up a message which maybe is incorrect username or incorrect
Membership ID.
membership. Yes.
Now, let's state that in the requirement. So, help me here. If
if the eligible voter if the eligible voter puts in or imputes a wrong membership ID.
You will not say wrong, so you say incorrect.
Okay, incorrect membership ID. An error message will pop up.
So let's use display since you're already using display, right? Let's not change it to pop-up. If we are using pop-up before, we can continue using pop-up, okay?
Okay.
To be displayed
An
saying
okay,
what should you say?
Wrong.
Sorry?
Kindly use the accurate membership ID or wrong membership ID. Kindly use the right membership ID. Or incorrect.
Right? So remember we'll find what a correct membership ID is up here. So you say, please refer to the correct format of a membership ID above. Okay, thanks, Mitchell. So from you, Ahmad, if the eligible voter happen to enter the accurate information, that's the correct membership ID and the correct password, and clicks on login, but the home page doesn't load, maybe there's an error, something breaks, what should happen? So how do we write that?
I think in such case, the password must have been wrong, right?
No, everything is correct.
Okay.
But everything is correct and we clicked on login button, but it's not loading and maybe the system breaks. What should we tell the customer? What should happen?
We should ask them to try again.
Good. So let's put it in a requirement statement. So help me out.
If the eligible voter imports,
let's say, attempts to log in it's correct, or should I say valid credentials, but let me see. But an error occurs, right?
Yeah.
A message
should be displayed. Yeah, saying
or you could say request timeouts.
Okay, great.
Please try again.
Again later.
Okay, let's put later.
Yes, I get this message.
So you get the message.
When I'm trying to use my banking app at times.
So this is what is the business analyst actually wrote this thing. That way I'm getting it. Yeah. And there should be an OK button, which when clicked returns the eligible voter to the login page.
Yeah.
Many people miss this other part of the statement. They only stop at this place. So you need to instruct your developer that there should be an OK button so that when you click it, or there should be a close button. So when you click, you can close that message and you're returned to the login page. So we can go on and on writing as much acceptance criteria as we.
Can I ask a question here?
Please go ahead.
At times, the message, such message of a request timeouts usually displays when the user has spent too much time on the page.
Yes.
So we can also adapt this for that, like saying if the eligible voter has stayed more than so time on the page trying to log in. So is that applicable?
Yeah, it's also applicable as well.
Okay.
It's also applicable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you can spend on and on, can go on and on writing these requirements. That is the acceptance criteria for this user story. Ensure that you've captured all angles or all scenarios or all conditions or criteria that is necessary to implement this sign-in or login feature for eligible voter. So, Mitchell, I don't know if you have any question, or Akma, do you have any follow-up question before we call it a close to the class for today?
I do have a question. I noticed that instead of saying user story, you put it as job story. Is it because we are writing for the developers team?
No, you can see it as user story. There's no difference. Whether user story or job story, see the same thing.
But there must be consistency, right?
Yes. If you are using job story, I just I'm fond of using job story because my place of work, the framework is for us to be writing job story. That is a framework. So I use that as well. But other people use it as title it as user story as well in their place of work. So it depends.
So it means I must comply with what my company is using. If it's job, I stick to job. If it's user story, I stick to user story.
Fine, but you don't need to ask them what they're using.
Okay.
You just need to write. Do you understand?
Okay.
And then go ahead. It's the same thing. But everybody understand it to be
Yes,
the
I
same.
understand. I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. All right. I think that brings us to the end of the class today. Let me stop recording so we can discuss other things related to the project.